I think I have identified the location of the Harry Olsen estate, and I'm going to limit this video to the location topic without discussing much else. But just as a review, for those of you who have forgotten, Harry Olsen was a police officer, a Dallas police officer. At the time of the assassination, he was not working because he had injured his knee. He wasn't working as a policeman, but he was guarding an estate on the day of the assassination for another policeman. And this is from his Warren Commission testimony. I was employed by the Dallas Police Department, and I was working at an extra job guarding an estate. Whose estate was that? I don't remember the name. How did you happen to get that extra job? A motorcycle officer was related to this elderly woman, and he was doing work, but he was in the motorcade of the president, and I was off that day and able to work it. Do you recall the name of the motorcycle officer? No. And can you believe that? He doesn't know the name of his fellow police officer he's working for this day? And can you believe that Arlen Specter just accepts that answer and moves along? Where was that estate located? On 8th Street in Dallas. Do you recall the specific address or the cross street on which it was located? It's in the Oak Cliff area. It's approximately 2 blocks off Stemmons. Now, I'm naturally somewhat suspicious of Harry Olsen because he's involved with Jack Ruby in some way. And I'm suspicious of some motorcycle officers, and I know their names, even if Harry doesn't. And so, armed with this information, I've been trying to locate his house. And I used a 1961 street guide that I didn't realize was part of this directory, but there's a separate street guide. And I just went down 8th Street looking for the names of the residents there in 1961. And I came up with a name that matched the name of one of my suspicious motorcyclists. Catherine Jackson lived at 1114 East 8th Street. And that, you look at the map on the left, you can see that's about 2 blocks off of the highway. Olsen calls it the Stemmons Highway in his testimony. It's actually, I think this is actually the Thornton Highway, but it can be the only highway he means. Catherine Jackson has the same last name as D.L. Jackson, who is very high on my suspicion list. Cheney is only Cheney is higher, but James Cheney. But D.L. Jackson is another one. These were the 2 motorcyclists on the right rear of the limousine, and you can see him in the picture on the bottom in the middle. You can see JFK in that same picture, and on the picture on the right there's a picture of him at Parkland Hospital with some guy's hand in his pocket for reasons unknown. So here I have a matching name. Now, a woman, an old lady who would live in an estate, who presumably had just died, wouldn't necessarily have the same last name as a relative. It could be a different last name. But we have one here that matches. It matches in location. It matches in the name to the suspicious motorcyclist who was in the motorcade. So I think it's a good bet that this is the estate. And remember, estate is a legal term. If you die and you own only a can of beans, then the can of beans is your estate. So I think this can of beans is the estate that Harry Olsen was guarding. I think it belonged to Catherine Jackson. She apparently is a widow. The way these things are listed in this book, usually they list the man's name, and then in parentheses they'll put the wife's first name. But in this situation, it's just Mrs. Kath Jackson. And the implication is that she's a widow, and that would be consistent with an old lady who perhaps had just died in 1963, even if she was alive in 1961. So it all fits, and I think it's very likely that that is the Harry Olsen estate. And I think it's also very likely that it might have been a depot used by the conspirators. But I can't prove that. Alright, that's good for today.